is my fight song. Take back my life song. Prove I'm alright song. My power's turned on. Starting right now, I'll be strong. I'll play my fight song. And I don't really care if nobody else believes, 'cause I've still got a lot of fight left in me. Welcome back to StillerBros at the Movies, where today we're talking about the other side of A24 movies. The more adults talking and sitting in rooms and talking kinds of movies. The Smashing Machine. So, it's been a little while since we've talked about a Dwayne Johnson movie. And it's not, and part of it is just kind of the fact that he has not put out a lot of movies in the last couple of years. But he did put out two, like, almost concurrently last year, even though one of them you wouldn't technically call a Dwayne Johnson movie.
No, but about a year ago, we had a Dwayne Johnson movie that kind of felt like the parody of Dwayne Johnson movies that you would see as a skit on, like, Young Rock.
The thing about it is that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has basically built his entire career out of being the way he is. His characters are usually the same. In fact, you know what? Screw this. I had a whole thing about this about 6 years ago when we talked about Hobbs and Shaw. So instead of just doing that again, I'm just going to flash back to like, ooh. I've been thinking about it a lot recently, and I figured out the perfect code to making a Dwayne Johnson movie. Essentially, you cast Dwayne Johnson as this all-American cop, football player, soldier, what have you, and you stick him in a really big, action-heavy situation, and basically the only reason that there are any other characters in the movie is to react to how awesome and inhumanly perfect he is. And yeah, that's basically what I stand by. Dwayne Johnson's roles have kind of been the same, and it was fine when it would be like, okay, we've got a couple of Rock movies to kind of fill out the rest, but at a certain point you just kind of get tired of seeing the same thing over and over again, especially when you get the idea that Dwayne Johnson really wants to make it seem like he is playing the same character the whole time, to the point of the long rumored clause in all of his contracts that say that his character can't lose a fight.
But now things are a little different because we have a biopic about an MMA wrestler, Mark Kerr, where Dwayne Johnson is playing the lead opposite Emily Blunt from director Benny Safdie.
Benny Safdie, the guy who basically made it so that Adam Sandler is a guy that we honestly thought would get an Academy Award nominee. But yeah, the point is, Benny Safdie, taking a break from being the villain in Happy Gilmore 2, I'm not joking, is the writer, director, producer, and editor on this movie. So yeah, the Safdie brothers, the guys who directed Good Times and Uncut Gems, have unfortunately split up as a directing duo, which means that between them and the Coen brothers, all we need to do is get the Russo brothers to split up, and we can take over their control as the main brothers in movie making. Joe, I heard Anthony say he hates you, and if that doesn't work, Anthony, I heard Joe said the same thing. Now we wait. But the important thing is that Benny Safdie is making his solo feature directorial debut with The Smashing Machine, and it's a biopic about something that we don't know a lot about.
No, this is somewhat based off of a documentary from 23 years ago. But in terms of biopics, this is one of the times where we're going to see a biopic we know almost nothing about.
I only know the bare minimum amount in the fact that I skimmed Mark Kerr's Wikipedia page like a week ago just to see if he was still alive at this point. He is. In fact, recently he started popping up at promotional gigs with The Rock just to be like, hey, here I am. And as of right now, the thing, and yeah, this is a biopic, and it's also seeming to be Dwayne Johnson attempting to be an Oscar caliber actor. And that's probably just to kind of prove he can do it. Because a lot of people over the last couple of years, especially when John Cena and Dave Bautista have been expanding their reach out into more interesting roles. Like John Cena has jumped headfirst into weird and just completely out of left field comedy movies, and Dave Bautista has kind of run the gamut between big prestige drama and also weird out of left field comedies.
Yeah.
But as a result, Dwayne Johnson has kind of had himself left in the dust by these two, mostly because I really don't think Dwayne Johnson is a bad actor, especially if you watch the two Jumanji movies.
Why does everybody keep calling me Spencer?
Where he actually needed to play somewhat against type. But it's the fact that there's a lack of diversity in his roles. It's always been the same, to the point that Red One just kind of felt like it was just like, look, I'm here, let's just do this. And now, here we are with him attempting his second attempt at a biopic. Because, little known fact about Dwayne Johnson, because this biopic never ended up happening, he was previously contracted for a little while to play country singer Charlie Pride in a biopic based on his life.
That's right. This guy was going to play this guy.
And as a result, we're just kind of left wondering what might have been there, because we do not know a lot about what that biopic was going to be. I don't even know if they ever had a director attached.
I don't think so. I don't know.
But apparently this is really a showcase for what Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt can do as actors. Emily Blunt, of course, already having shown off 2 years ago for Oppenheimer, but now here it is being like, maybe now she can get an Oscar nomination that she might actually win at. We'll see at that. But if Dwayne Johnson actually manages to get an Oscar nomination for this, well, that'll certainly be interesting.
I mean, he's had a bunch of prestige stuff that's failed to cross the finish line in the past. There was that Robert Zemeckis project that he was working on for a while that never really seems to go anywhere.
And now, after The Smashing Machine, he is currently, at some point, probably going to be in a Martin Scorsese gangster movie set in Hawaii.
But the next movie he's working on is Moana again.
Yeah, he already has shot scenes for live-action Moana, which a lot of people have probably theorized is going to be just him deciding, I'm going to play Maui real quick before I can't physically play this character anymore. And as if to prove the point, he's already started to slim down for his next role in Benny Safdie's next solo movie.
Yeah.
So it's just a case of, we've got The Rock, very unrecognizable looking, by the way, because the first time we saw an image for this, that it just kind of looked like, oh, he really got into this character in a certain way.
And it's going to be interesting to see what this is.
It's going to be especially interesting to see the people's reaction to it, because, like I said, I don't think that The Rock is a bad actor. If anything, he's not just good for a wrestler, he's actually a really good actor when he shows up for it. But the fact is that a lot of people have been seeing other wrestlers turned actors stretch their muscles and be like, oh, these guys actually know what they're doing, and meanwhile, he's been doing the same thing. So here's a chance for him to just kind of stretch his muscles and be like, look, I can do other stuff. This isn't a huge stretch because he's still technically playing a fighter, but for the first time in a long time, he's playing someone who isn't fully in control of the situation that he's in. He's playing a guy who actually has the possibility to lose a fight, because it's not just, oh, I'm a cop, soldier, spy, whatever you need me to be, and I'm gonna, push a torpedo out of the way to show how strong and badass I am. This is a real guy who had to go through real struggles, and in some ways is probably still struggling. I don't know anything about Mark Kerr's life or what he's doing right now, but yeah. I don't know what to say about The Smashing Machine other than it looks like it's a big prestige bump for Dwayne Johnson, and we'll see how it pulls that off after the jump. So that's what we mean when we say that The Rock is actually a pretty good actor.
Yeah, that was pretty good. At times it could be very intense.
It was somewhat of a harrowing movie. Don't get me wrong, it's not like the intensity of Uncut Gems here, where we're watching a guy who is clearly addicted to just the very concept of being addicted to everything.
No, what we're seeing here is a guy who is not even. There are biopics where he's not even as self-destructive as the characters in most biopics that you see.
Though the thing of it is that it actually shocked me with how much Mark Kerr is actually involved in this movie, how much they were willing to show him as more of a complex character than most other biopics. Let me put it this way. This movie is more willing to make Mark Kerr look like a bad person in some scenes than Bohemian Rhapsody was willing to show the living members of Queen as anything other than just the guys who had to put up with Freddie Mercury's BS.
Yeah. That's the thing, and let's get into it a little bit. First of all, Dwayne Johnson is amazing in this.
Yeah. From the beginning of this, you kind of get the feeling that it's like, this is a guy who has lived through these experiences, and so he wants to tell a story very similar to it. The difference being that Mark Kerr definitely had to deal with a lot of an uphill battle between the fact that he needed to fight his way up the ranks. MMA is a lot more involved than professional wrestling in a lot of ways, because professional wrestling, it's storylines as much as it is actual athleticism and fighting. MMA, not so much. It's just a bunch of guys wailing on each other.
Do you think you're part of some, like, gay beat-up underworld? Like one of those gay beat-up clubs or something?
But there's also just the physical transformation, like, that you see. Like, Dwayne Johnson isn't... He doesn't stand the way he usually stands. He doesn't move the way he usually moves. He doesn't talk the way he usually talks. He just...
Hell, I give a lot of credit to the makeup artists, because it looks like they just completely changed his facial structure to make him look like a completely different person in some shots.
Yeah. Like, it's insane, especially with the fact that there's a bunch of oneers in here where we don't even see his face, but you can understand how he's feeling just from the way he's moving and the way he's breathing. And
it really says something about the fact that him and Emily Blunt have this really big to and fro energy where it's a really bad relationship in a lot of ways. You can tell these are two people who truly want to care about each other, but they're also just both fighting each other every step of the way. Like, he's fighting these demons within him, and she wants to be there for him, but on some level she also just feels like she's being shut out and doesn't really care for that.
It's a lot of self-destructive behavior that's the worst kind of that can breed the worst kind of relationships. And obviously Emily Blunt had some experience acting that, like we said earlier, in Oppenheimer, but this is a completely different character than the kind of things she was doing in Oppenheimer.
Yeah, and it's just, this movie is a lot of MMA stuff.
There's not a lot of fighting in it per se.
I mean, there's a lot of big moments built around the idea of a bunch of characters beating each other up, because it's a movie about a bunch of fighters so there's a lot of big muscular guys punching the crap out of each other in scenes, but occasionally there will be a moment where it's like, oh yeah, this is supposed to be some kind of art house movie.
It's a lot quieter than you would expect a movie about MMA fighters to be. It's not about fighting so much as it is about these people.
And yeah, it is very biopic in the fact that there's a lot of usual beats it has to hit. There's symbolism that you can kind of see coming a mile away. It's not this big change to the form, but it really works as a movie, because as a movie it really has just to be both a showcase for Blunt and Johnson to just be like, hey, we would really like it if we could get some acting recognition, and it's for Benny Safdie to just be like, hey, I can kind of do this on my own, which really pushes, because Benny Safdie seems to really have leaned heavy on the directorial flourishes of, I'm going to make this look like a fly-on-the-wall documentary as much as possible.
Yeah.
Where to the point that I could probably count on one hand the number of still shots in this movie where the camera does not feel like, oh, these people are just kind of freewheeling it, and I gotta make sure that I get as much in the shot as possible.
Yeah, it's a lot of handheld camera work. There's a lot of moving around. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of one takes where it's a lot of following characters from room to room. It's just insane to think this is a movie that is from the same production company that gave us freaking Red One and Red Notice and Skyscraper.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be like a start of big prestige pictures for the rest of Dwayne Johnson's career.
No, I feel like even with any kind of critical recognition, there's a possibility he might not even get nominated for any awards this year, because it could very well be buried by a lot more bigger prestige stuff.
Yeah, but it still definitely feels like something different. It feels like something where they just really wanted to take this particular big swing.
It's a smaller movie for him, which is insane from a guy who's made his entire career off of pretty much only being in blockbusters.
And it is kind of weird how small this movie is sometimes. Like, even the fact that a lot of the bigger fight scenes in this movie take place in what are supposed to be packed arenas with 40,000 fans in Japan just kind of still feels small. And I think that was purposeful, just to kind of make everything feel like we're focusing on this specific group of characters. Mark Kerr, his girlfriend Dawn, and his friend Mark Coleman.
Yeah.
And it just feels like we're focusing on these specific characters just because this is the specific story we want to tell from this specific point to a different specific point.
Yeah, because we're telling this story of these people, and we obviously do have to focus on his addiction at times, but it's not something that, like with most biopics, there's a huge amount of showing his withdrawal or showing him going to rehab at all.
Literally, he walks into a rehab clinic, he walks out, and then he just kind of weirdly never relapses.
No, which maybe he didn't realize. Maybe that's because he didn't.
Maybe he stayed. I'm going to assume that the reason that they didn't do that was because he got clean, stayed clean for the rest of his life, and that's just kind of how that happened. So they didn't want to sugarcoat it and make it seem like, oh, but then he like went really deep. But it's also a case of it's just kind of a subversion of the usual genre trope, because it's like, I'm going to walk into a rehab clinic, I'm going to walk out, I'm going to...
Yeah, he walks into a rehab clinic, 5 minutes later, movie time. We see him walk out of the clinic, and he's changed and he's better.
We don't go in and we don't see him at like an Addicts Anonymous meeting. We don't see him.
I need more blankets and less blankets at the same time.
We don't see anything. Now, it's not to say that there's not any scenes that make you think of Walk Hard. There's definitely a couple of scenes where he goes into full freakout mode and he starts wrecking stuff, but
which also kind of helps to demonstrate kind of the toxicity of this relationship between these two people.
But it's also just a case of this is definitely a movie where between Mark and Dawn there are no heroes. In fact, if anything, I feel like Mark Coleman is the one who walks away from this the cleanest.
Yeah.
But probably because the focus is more on Mark Kerr and Dawn than it is on Mark Coleman. Mark Coleman is more just kind of the Apollo in the later Rocky movies to Mark Kerr as Rocky in this particular case, if we're going to compare it to any other famous fighting movie.
But more than anything, there's no happy, sappy Hollywood ending.
Yeah, it literally ends on a moment that's just kind of like, this guy went off, he lived his life, he's still living his life, and that's it. There's no big emotional swell in the score, there's no gigantic, big, I won the tournament, I married my sweetheart, I'm going to live this spectacular life from now on. This is just a guy who was a huge pioneer in the sport that he fought in. He is now just kind of out there living his life because he retired.
He retired, he's been living the last 16 years of his life, and he seems happy.
Yeah. This isn't like a big victory. I'm not expecting like a huge sequel where he needs to go and do anything bigger, but this is very much a case of everything worked out. maybe just not where it's a case of he's off living with millions out there somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, The Smashing Machine as a feature debut for Benny Safdie, pretty solid. As an acting showcase for Emily Blunt and Dwayne Johnson, perfect for both of them. And I really hope that this gives people the opportunity to not crap on Dwayne Johnson's acting as much. I'm not essentially saying, hey, we need to start treating Dwayne Johnson as the acting super talent that he is, but maybe just acknowledge that when he's good, he's really good.
Yeah.
So, that's it for right now. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, leave in the comments what you may or may not have thought of The Smashing Machine, or even just what's your favorite movie in Dwayne Johnson's entire filmography up until this point. And don't forget to tune in next time when I stand with the users. Oh, and also it's our 200th episode. Bye.
Bye.
You have to pin him on his back.
No.